What's going on, guys? So we are out at the brand new 2021 Coachmen Brookstone 398 MBL Concept Edition. I kind of call it the BTBRV concept. Why? Because this was a collaboration that I did with the folks over at Coachmen to take a floor plan that they currently had and to modify it slightly. Now, there are some more details about this floor plan that they currently had that you need to know. So the 398 MBL was a floor plan that was introduced about 2 years ago as a 2020 model, and that specific floor plan did not exist until the collaboration that I did with them back then. So there's a lot to this story, and there's a lot of reasons why I specifically worked with the folks over at Coachmen with the new Brookstone. So I want to take a second and I want to try to address some of the questions that have been asked and why I specifically am working with Coachmen and the Brookstone and not some other brand. So hang tight, I'll be right back. All right, so the backstory behind this collaboration with Brookstone actually started in 2019 when I was in Salt Lake City at RVX. I was walking around the entire facility. It's this huge warehouse or convention center that was set up with RVs, RV accessories, all sorts of different manufacturers brought in units to showcase, as well as pretty much every accessory you can imagine that goes into constructing or in terms of aftermarket accessories for RVs. And I stopped by the Coachmen booth because they had a Brookstone that was there, and I actually mentioned that this might be our next fifth wheel, just based on the fact that we were a satisfied Coachmen Chaparral customer, and the Brookstone was essentially a step up. And at the time, I believe I had about 100,000 subscribers, so my channel wasn't that large, and it was still growing, and I really didn't know what we would want as our next fifth wheel. So just like all the other RVs that were there, I decided to do a video tour. While I was walking around that unit, there were a couple folks that walked onto it, and they all happened to be employees of Coachmen, and they were kind of asking, what I was doing and what publication or what media source I was with and why I was on that specific unit. And I told them I'm with a YouTube channel called Big Truck Big RV, and I currently had a Chaparral, and we were looking at possibly getting something bigger in the future. So the Coachmen representatives asked me what I thought of my Chaparral. So aside from a few minor little issues, we really liked it. From a value perspective, we thought it was an amazing value. We were really happy with what we got in terms of what we paid for. So, they were really happy to hear that, and they started asking me questions, such as what I thought about the tires that they had put on. And the tires that came on that unit were a brand called Constancy. They were definitely a foreign imported tire, and they were an F-rated tire. And they seemed to be pretty proud of the tire, basically saying, we went to this tire because we wanted to put a radial on that was a little bit better quality. And kind of instantly I snapped back and I said, well, I probably would have recommended you go with something like a Saloon or a G-rated tire to put on there, because one of the things that I had done on that unit was replace the tires with the Saloon tires, because I didn't want to run the specific Constancy tires that came with them, because again, I'm just not a big fan of those tires, and I wanted something that was an all-steel rated tire. So we talked about that some more, and we discussed some more things. Well, a gentleman that was on the RV with us at the time and hadn't been talking much was, I believe, either the vice president or the president of Coachmen. And he kind of chimed in and said, what other ideas do you have? What else do you think we could have done? We'd love to know. So I said, I have a lot of ideas. I would love to do some type of a collaboration with you guys and perhaps see if some of the ideas that I have, some of the polls that I run on my channel, some of the questions and feedback I get from viewers and subscribers, if we could integrate some of that into an RV. And they got really excited. They all said, this is a really good opportunity. Let's talk about it further. So fast forward about 4 months from then, I got an email from the folks at Coachmen basically saying, it's time for us to look at coming out with the next floor plan in the Brookstone lineup. And we want it to be a mid-bunk. So we would love to collaborate with you, get some ideas, and, run some different ideas past your subscribers and viewers to see what they may be interested in. So I put a ton of polls out. I think I put about 10 polls out in a matter matter of 2 or 3 days, just asking my subscribers and viewers what they thought about certain things, such as disc brakes, G-rated tires, LED lighting, all sorts of different things related to the inside, related to different aspects of, the slide system and, the leveling system, all sorts of different questions. And I got a lot of really good feedback. Each poll garnered about 6,000 to 10,000 responses, and you could clearly see the direction people would lean, especially in terms of, would you pay slightly more if you got a more robust component, if you got a better suspension equalizer, if you got the G-rated tires, things like that. And it let me know what viewers and subscribers were interested in, but more importantly, what they would actually pay for if a manufacturer would listen to them. So I got back in touch with the folks at Coachmen, and we had several calls kind of discussing what this new mid-bunk would look like, what type of features it would have. And I actually flew up to Elkhart, visited the folks at Coachmen, and we looked at the construction process of Coachmen fifth wheels. I walked down the line, and it was really cool because I actually did it while they were building the fifth wheels. The plant wasn't shut down, it wasn't swept, and it wasn't completely cleaned out like you see a lot of tours. This was an active production line. It was really loud, really noisy. I think I did a 3-part series on it, and it's worth checking out because I really dove deep into the construction practice, and you could see just how busy these factories are when they're actively producing units. So again, this wasn't a scheduled tour. This wasn't a, let's shut everything down, sweep everything up so it looks, spotless in here for video. This was an active production. And I really got to see, and you guys really got to see, what it takes to build an RV in real time. So we went through all that. We actually looked at some other floor plans in the past that they had created, as well as some floor plans that other manufacturers had, and tried to figure out what would be a very practical approach, given the fact that we had roughly a 42-foot limitation in terms of length, a little over that, because the factory, and this is something a lot of people may not know, oftentimes the length of the RV is dictated by how much room is in the factory to physically move it down the line. So, you can't just expand the overall size of your factory and re-engineer the design of your factory overnight. So one of the limitations we had was it had to stay about 42 feet 9 inches, I believe, or less. Otherwise, it just physically wouldn't fit through the factory. Now, if they go to a larger factory, that might change. But as it stands today, 42 feet 9 inches is kind of the limit of what an RV can be, built in terms of length to actually fit physically down the line. So we went over and discussed the different various floor plan ideas, whether we put the entrance to the mid-bunk coming from the kitchen or from the hallway. We talked about different storage solutions. If you did that, how much room would you have for slides to go in on each side? Because a lot of people, even when they look at this unit, they say, well, why doesn't the pantry stick out as far as the coffee station? But then when you realize how this slide functions here, this slide, for it to be able to go in, has to be able to clear the pantry. So the pantry stops where it does because of this slide's need to take that space up when it goes in. A lot of people don't realize that it really takes some very, very careful planning in terms of the layout to get things to go where you see them in an RV and to really design the interior of the RV to be functional. So it's all about a compromise, right? If you want to have a really wide dual opposing slide system back here on a mid-bunk, well, you're probably not going to have access to this area with the slides in, and there's actually no access here at all. So if you look at almost all mid-bunks, when these slides are in, you can't get back to the living area and you can't get back to your refrigerator. But the benefit is you can still access your mid-bunk, the bathroom, and the bedroom, even with all the slides in. So that's kind of, again, the compromise, right? You have to look at what you get when you have 4 slides on an RV like this. Anyways, we went over all sorts of different floor plan designs and different ideas, but ultimately they kind of picked the things that they liked best from these collaborations that we had, and they introduced the first 398 MBL as a product, I believe, in early 2020. And I had the chance to introduce the first version of the 398 MBL in several videos and kind of show you all what it was all about, why we did certain things. But when I walked through it, some things that I realized is that, if I could have been on more calls with them, if I could have had deeper collaborations with them, we probably could have done some things a little bit better. So we didn't end up buying the first generation 398 MBL because there were things that we just didn't really care for about it. There were different things such as the amount of pantry space that you had, you know, the island, some of the things that they did there. There were just some little things that we didn't prefer. And when I got my wife on board she walked through and she didn't really care for how the trash can was situated, how some of the cabinets were a little bit too low. We really didn't care for the size of the coffee station. The pantry felt small. The desk inside of the mid bunk was a little bit too shallow. Actually, it was quite a bit too shallow. It was functional for people who bought it. A lot of people responded shortly after that they just purchased their 398 MBL and they absolutely loved it. They thought we nailed everything. But we kind of felt that we could have done things a little bit different and better utilized space. Some of the upgrades that had been done to that RV were absolutely fantastic. We were able to go to a G-rated tire, so they definitely took my advice there. We upgraded to the Road Armor suspension, which was something else I talked about, plus the heavy-duty shackle straps, greasable wet bolts. Went to all LED lighting on the outside and inside, which was really nice. And there were a lot of little things that they did pick up on. The interior, you know, I didn't collaborate on the interior as much as I would have liked to have. And that is one of the reasons why I think there were some areas that we could have better utilized space. So fast forward to early 2020, and I get an email from the folks over at Coachmen, and they said that they wanted to do a deeper collaboration with me in terms of really hitting on some of the things that I would like to have changed between the current 398 MBL, which was a huge sales success. People were really buying this unit. They were having a hard time producing the number of floor plans to meet the demand. So they contacted me and we got on several calls and we went over floor plans. We did a lot of work over about a 3-month period, maybe a 4-month period, trying to figure out how we can better utilize space and give people more of what they're looking for based on feedback and based on other units that I had walked through. So we were able to come up with the version 1 of the next generation Brookstone. So it's basically this, but it was a slightly different version of this. It was the first version. This is the second version of it. And once they showed it to me and they walked through it, they went into full production on it. Well, after they had produced it and we started walking through it, we noticed there were some areas that could have been done better, like the pantry. There just wasn't enough depth to it. The pantry was only like 5 inches deep. So we looked inside of the mid bunk and we saw that we could scoot the wall against the slide a little bit closer, about 3 inches, and it would gain us about 3 additional inches of depth in the pantry area, you know, in terms of the island and some of the things that we did to get the flip-up counter. And one of the focuses I had there was, I said, I absolutely do not want to see a potential failure of that island flip-up counter because it's super heavy. So that was a conversation that we had over and over about making sure that if you're going to attach something, it's got to be reliable. It can't just be laying on the floor whenever we get to where we're going because it wasn't attached properly. So what they basically said was, you know what, instead of trying to change the version 1 of this 398 MBL, let's just start over and let's not have it as a prototype unit, but let's turn it into a concept. We're going to take all the things that we learned from that one and we're going to turn it into this. And that's essentially how I ended up with this unit in front of me. Now, I know this is a long backstory, but the reason why I want to share this with you all is because I want you all to understand just how long the talks took with Coachmen to get to where we're at today, and why when I tell you it was a 1.5 years worth of collaborating, it really was. We had to go through essentially 3 different units. The first version of the 398 MBL, then the first version of this 398 MBL, and then finally this 398 MBL. So again, a lot of collaboration there. We had to talk a lot about the 3 air conditioners up top, the type of roofing material, the type of tires, the axles, everything that needed to take place to get to where we're at today with this specific concept. Now, all that being said, the question is, why Brookstone? Well, I think I went over that in the backstory. The fact is they were very willing to do what they needed to do to try to get a floor plan out that was feasible to reveal on my channel. Now, keep in mind, Brookstone is not what I would consider to be a rich man's RV. What do I mean by that? If you are expecting this to compete against a DRV, a Lux, a New Horizon, or even a Vanley Beacon, you're probably setting your expectations way too high. There are a lot of features about this that I think are actually nicer, such as the use of Asdel in their sidewalls. There are a lot of features that were just added to this that you can't even get on some of those other units. Plus, I believe that we nailed the floor plan, and I don't think any of those manufacturers really have a floor plan that can directly compete, aside from Lux, which is a significantly longer and significantly heavier fifth wheel. So you kind of have to reevaluate your tow vehicle as well as your budget, because the Lux is going to be roughly $80,000 or more greater in price than this specific unit, even as equipped with all of these upgrades. And I wanted to have a very real and common sense approach to working with a manufacturer that builds a unit that I believe most people looking for this type of fifth wheel could afford. What you can expect from a production-ready version of this fifth wheel with whatever they choose to go with. I don't know if it'll have 3 ACs, it'll likely have 2 ACs, it'll likely have 7,000-pound axles, but it will probably have the upgraded tires, upgraded wheels. It's still going to have the road armor suspension. It's still going to have the 6-way ground control 3 leveling system. It's still going to have Asdel in the walls. You'll probably still get the flip-up counter at the end. You're going to get most of what you see here, aside from a few things. But a production version of this, I can imagine on the high end, is probably going to be maybe in the high 50s or low $60,000 price range from a sale price. If you're looking at a unit with every conceivable upgrade with the Onan generator installed, which is an option, things like that, you're probably going to be in the 60s, somewhere in the mid 60s. But that's still going to price you significantly less than a lot of units that you probably would want to compare this to. And you would say, well, you know, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you put an electric cord reel? Why didn't you put, you know, a one-piece solid fiberglass roof? Why didn't you do, you know, independent suspension on it? Those features are generally even upgrade options on your higher end brands like your Riverstones or your Redwoods or your Beacons. And those units are all going to be priced from an MSRP perspective in the $140,000 to $150,000 price range, whereas their sale price is still going to be well north of $100,000. This specific unit, with pretty much everything you see minus a few things, is going to be well under that. Again, I didn't want to make a unit that people couldn't afford. Sure, this is still going to be out of the budget of a lot of people, right? But I would say at that point, you might want to look at a Chaparral. Or if you're not even looking at a Coachmen product, there's a lot of other brands that have products in that price range. What I wanted to try to do is collaborate with a brand that was able to produce something I think the average working family could afford. That was the goal. The retired couple that, you know, has been saving up their entire life and wants to spend $150,000 or $120,000 on a fifth wheel, you know, you may be looking at a unit that has features that are superior to this, you know, a different style frame. Maybe some of the features that you would like this to have come on those units. But my goal, again, was to have a unit that would really target those folks that are looking for a really good floor plan in a really good value price point. And that's what I think we did here. I love the fact that we were able to do a lot of the structural, a lot of the suspension and chassis upgrades, as well as keeping Asdel in a unit with a 10-inch I-beam on a 12-inch I-beam in a price range that, again, I feel most people looking for this type of fifth wheel can afford. And that was the overall goal. That's the reason why I continued the collaboration with Coachmen. I have had interest from multiple RV manufacturers, some of them well over $150,000, some of them from brands I had never heard of before, some of them from RV manufacturers that you all have heard of, but the collaboration at that point would have had to start from scratch, and I didn't really want to work with a manufacturer, at least right off the bat, that was producing a unit that you all saw, fell in love with, but could never afford. That's kind of the reason why I stuck with the Coachmen Brookstone, is because I felt it was an affordable, value-oriented, still mid to high-level fifth wheel. And we sacrificed some things. We absolutely did, because I really didn't feel that like an electric cord reel or the cost of upgrading to a full water manifold system. Some of those things, I didn't feel like that cost should take away from the suspension, should take away from the disc brakes, should take away from the 3 AC units. I felt that most of those features would have been nice, but not necessarily something that I wanted to compromise the chassis components to get. And if we had added all those components to this this unit, even with the chassis and all the other upgrades, it would have raised the price of this unit significantly. Same if we used a on-demand water system. Would have been really nice. Again, is it really needed? Same as if we installed the Insignia stove inside. Nice, but is it really needed? And if I could shave some cost there and put it back into some components that are safer on the road, that would give you a more confident towing experience, that's ultimately what I wanted to do. So I know this is a really long backstory with a really long explanation of why I worked with Coachmen, but it's, I think, something a lot of people wanted to hear and a lot of people wanted to see. So that's the reason why the relationship with Coachmen for this specific Brookstone took place, and why I hung in there so long to make sure that we finished it and then we got it to a point to where you can actually see the end result right in front of you. And I'm going to be doing reviews. Do I think that all the components, the materials, everything, the craftsmanship inside of this is truly comparable against a DRV, a Lux, or a Beacon, or a New Horizon? No, I don't. I know that I'm getting decent quality. I know that I'm getting components and cabinetry and things inside that aren't custom and aren't at that level that you would expect if you're buying a $150,000 RV, but it's a compromise I'm willing to make because the cabinetry and everything in the Chaparral held up really well. And I figured, you know what, if it holds up well and they didn't have to go out and spend significantly more to have like master craftsmanship put the stuff together, if it was produced for, you know, all of their units going down the assembly line, then I'm okay with it. It was an area that we could save some cost, and that was the ultimate goal. So I'm sorry for drawing this out and making a really long video about it, but I really do think it needed to be heard, and I do think that people wanted to know, again, why I worked with Coachmen on this. Now, there are other manufacturers that still reach out to me, and I might work with some other manufacturers on some products. I would really like to work with a manufacturer that makes an entry-level, really low-cost travel trailer, and maybe some of the things we can do to that to make it a special unit as well. So, any manufacturers that are out there, I continue to want to hear your feedback, and if you want to work with me, shoot me an email, let me know. Anyways, I sure hope you enjoyed this incredibly long, drawn-out video. If you did, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.